Hi everyone, I'm on a mission to use my patterned paper more often. This set of quick and easy cards features Simon Says Stamps Vintage Garden coupled with some gorgeous patterned paper by Paper Consortium called Wildflower Meadow. They are brought together with a quick vellum overlay technique. The first thing that I did was create the frames for the vellum overlay panels. I'm working with 2 square dies with rounded corners from a nesting die set. The larger die with some low-tack tape facing upwards was placed in my MISTI so that I could easily get the second die centered. These cards were put together in assembly line fashion, so I did all of my prep work first. The frames were die cut from different tones of purple cardstock. The larger of the 2 dies used to cut the frame was also used to cut both vellum and patterned paper. Stamp set comes with 5 large primary sentiments. I'll be using them all to create 3 thank you cards and 3 sympathy cards. These main sentiments along with the floral designs will be stamped on the vellum paper with Versamark ink. Because the vellum panels are smaller, most of these floral stamps will need to extend beyond the boundaries of the paper. I'm using a sticky mat in my MISTI so that my panel can be placed right in the center. The stamps can extend off of the vellum and I don't have to worry about the raised edges of the MISTI interfering with them. When the sentiment is positioned on the panel, I do put the frame in place just to make sure that it's not going to cover up any of the lettering. Depending on the combination of sentiment with the floral, on some panels I'm able to stamp both images at the same time. This is a very quick and easy process, and in no time at all, roughly about 15-20 minutes, I have my 6 panels stamped and embossed with Simon Says Stamps silver embossing powder. When the images are stamped, I am using a pressure tool to make sure that I get a good impression. Because I'm doing everything in assembly line fashion, my heat tool is good and hot, so it takes just a few seconds to melt that silver embossing powder. Everything is organized and arranged in a stack. I know which vellum panel is going to go with which pattern paper, and then the frame that's going to be used on top of it. Even with all the precautions of using the heat tool at its maximum temperature and applying heat to the back and the front of the panel, there will always be a little bit of warping. As each panel is complete, I place it under some weight. A thin line of glue is applied around the perimeter of the vellum panel on the back, and it is adhered to the patterned paper. I make sure that both panels are aligned. Liquid adhesive is applied to the back of the frame, and then it is positioned on top of the panel, again making sure that everything lines up. Card bases have been constructed from Simon Says Stamps gray cardstock. There are 2 card bases for each of the 3 tones of gray, starting from lightest to darkest, fog gray, smoke, and the darkest slate. Choosing which panel was going to go on the different colored card bases, I looked to my background of my patterned paper. And the tones of gray on the patterned paper were pretty closely matched to that of the card bases. So once that was all sorted out, these small panels were adhered to the upper 2/3 of the card base. And like before, as they are being adhered, I am popping them under some weight. Because of the little bit of warping from the heat embossing and the fact that it was only adhered to the pattern paper around the edges of the panel, it does need weight on it for a bit of time so that it lays completely flat. I'm going to stamp secondary sentiments directly on the card base right below the vellum panel. The end of the sentiment is lined up to some degree to the right-hand side of the small panel. For the sympathy cards, my secondary sentiments are from one of my favorite stamp sets called Moments of Grace. If you are not familiar with this sentiment set, I encourage you to have a closer look at it. The wording is beautiful, and it covers everything from encouragement to loss. And I'm just tipping my MISTI up, making sure that my sentiment is aligned to the grid lines that are on the door of the MISTI. Sets that I'm using for the secondary sentiments are very fine, and so I'm going to be stamping with black VersaFine ink. This is a beautiful detail ink. I have to say that sentiment sets are definitely my Achilles heel. I just love them. For the 3 thank you cards, I'm using sentiments from another really beautiful set called Say It All Friend. These cards are going to be finished up with some pretty lilac colored confetti. They have been positioned in a triangle to highlight the secondary sentiment. And this next step is pretty typical for me. I'm going to be topping off the confetti with Nouveau Crystal Drops Morning Dew. When Morning Dew dries, it is clear, leaving a gorgeous jewel-like appearance. And that wraps up this set of pretty cards using an embossed vellum overlay on patterned paper. I hope you enjoyed this video featuring Simon Says Stamps Vintage Garden. As always, I appreciate your visit.